we have a three-member board. The statute and the ordinance require any approval include 3 affirmative votes. So if you want to proceed on this basis, that's fine. If anybody chooses not to proceed, withdraw their application, there's no harm, no foul as far as we're concerned. But it would mean that if you only get 2 affirmative votes on any of the applications tonight, the application will fail.
Okay.
David is actively pursuing additional members to the board, but we don't have them available yet.
Okay.
All right, so armed with that. So let's go ahead and introduce ourselves.
Zoe Washburn, Horton Lane.
Helena Whitty on Franklin Hill.
Bill Malcolm, Isaac Perkins Road.
And I'm Dave Robbins, Planning and Zoning Administrator, and I don't live in Lyme.
Okay. All right, our first order of business is the minutes from our last meeting. What is your pleasure with the minutes? This is from the February 15th meeting.
I move that we approve the minutes.
As submitted,
Yes, ma'am.
all right.
I think, are we missing a page?
It appears that there's a second page not there.
Oh, did
There's
I?
the my copy.
Oh, I only saw the outer deliberations.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, there should have been
Oh,
2
yeah,
pages.
Clover Mill.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't have the second page, but the first page looks great.
You want- I apologize. I'm not quite sure how I
That's okay.
messed that up, but I did.
All right, we'll hold up for a second. And this first page ends with a comma.
It's,
Okay. Can you pass it over to
oh,
me?
yes,
So-
absolutely.
Thank you.
No, I apologize, I had both copies, I don't
That's
know
okay.
where, I must, when I did the
All right,
photocopying, I didn't get that second page.
okay.
I move that we approve the minutes as submitted
All right,
in its
all
entirety.
right. Okay, all in favor, so by saying aye?
Aye.
All right, unanimous, good, the minutes are approved. Our next case is Sandra Robinson applied for a special exception to construct a replacement septic system within the property line setback on River Road. David, do you wanna introduce this case?
Well, I think, basically they're looking to, replace the septic that was already partially within that location, going with, a septic that can also handle a, ADU in the garage on the property. There's, it's a very small lot, there's not a whole lot of places, you can put it that would be outside of a setback. And outside of the well setback. I think Chris Leister's here. Chris, if you wanna kind of describe why you wanted to put it up there. You are muted, by the way. You need to unmute yourself, Chris. Nope, you're still,
There you go.
Okay,
there you go.
can you hear me now?
Yep.
So I was thinking about whether it was unmuting or muting that I wanted to do to myself there, but I guess I didn't do the right thing, right? So that little disposal system, have you got it on the screen so you can see the pipes all arranged there?
Yeah, we have it on, we have the maps.
We have.
Okay, well, that little group of pipes is wedged between the well radius and the steep slope on the east side and the property line and steep slope and setback from the river on the left side. And I can't even make the system the shape that I want it to. I can only put it in there as a cube because there's no other way to do it. And that, of course, ends up encroaching on the setback from the property line a little bit.
So I assume there was no place behind the house itself, to the south?
Like for example, out by the street,
No, I'm thinking, if you look at the site map, the property is kind of a triangle. If you get to the south end of the property behind the house,
Yeah. right?
is about the only other place it seemed open.
It's straight down over there.
Okay,
And you'd still be in the setback, wouldn't you?
yes, you would,
Looks like you would be,
You'd be in the setback to the property line, wouldn't you?
Same thing.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a pretty precision-sized piece of property, you know?
All right, any questions from board members for Chris or the applicant?
sorry, what's the size of this? I'm probably staring right at it on this plans. Chris, what's the size? Is it a 3-bedroom?
It's a three,
Two
no,
bedroom.
wait a minute, hold on.
The house is 2-bedroom, but there's an ADU, right?
It's current, yeah, it's a 3-bedroom design,
Yeah, okay.
correct.
So there are 2 septic tanks, is that right, Chris?
Yes, one for each residence due to state of New Hampshire rules.
Okay.
So two tanks, 1 shared leach field?
Correct,
Yeah.
yep.
But the tanks are in a fine place, it's just the leach field.
But the tanks are still gonna be probably within the
Oh, where they
35-foot setback.
Okay, I see.
And if you notice, there's a large circle, that's the well radius that you need to try to keep all that out of.
Yeah.
And so that's,
So they basically just make that, because that's 7452.
yep,
Right, the tanks could be within 50 feet of the well. It could be inside that 75-foot radius with thicker piping material going in and out of the tanks. And the tank would have to be coated.
Okay.
Tanks, that will be 2 tanks. Asphalt coated, waterproofed.
Okay.
And the existing tank is between the house and the ADU?
Up on the upper level,
Yes.
correct.
Okay. And that's abandoned then, and,
It will be removed, either pumped out and filled in with sand and left in place, or pumped out and removed completely.
and the pipe just left where it is? The existing
Right.
pipe, yeah.
Yes.
Anything else?
I think, Hennessy is here for this, so I don't know if you want to ask, if he wants.
Yep, please, if you have questions.
Yeah, I'm Paul Hennessy, and I'm one of the budding landowners.
Yes, sir.
And I just came to learn a little bit about what's going on. I don't have any concerns,
Okay.
although so I really just came for my own information. In looking at this plan, though, I do have a copy in my hand, and it's the first time I've noticed it when you asked about the tanks. How close are the tanks to our property line?
Are you on the river?
We're on the river. We're the property towards the river from this.
They'll be closer than the tank is today, if that's what you're asking.
Yep, because it almost, again, it's hard for me to tell where the property line is drawn here, but it almost looks like there's not very much room at all between the house and our property line. And I'm having a hard time envisioning those tanks, where they will be on their property.
You want, can you scale that off, Chris, and tell us how far the tanks are from the house?
The property line.
Or the property?
The way it's drawn, I've got it drawn 18 feet from the property line.
Okay.
But the property line is, not based upon any iron pins that I could find there. It could be a little bit one way or the other, because I couldn't find any pins. It's based off the right of way of the road and the far end, and, everything else is, measured from that.
Is the right of way along the road a survey line or just from the center line of the road?
Center line of the road.
Mr. Sanger, do you have a, excuse me, it's Sanger, it's your first name, I beg your pardon. Do you have a survey of your property?
I don't know.
I know we don't have one on file here. Do you have a survey?
No, not to my knowledge, we don't.
So your boundary line is by mutual agreement?
There had been a boundary pin there a couple of years ago, and I can't find it anymore.
Okay.
Can I ask what the tanks, so the two tanks can be shifted within the 75 if it's just made out of a more durable material?
Absolutely.
It has to be coated? So is there a reason why that can't, because then that would solve, it would push it further away from the setback, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
You have a stone wall behind your accessory dwelling unit, correct?
Mm.
Between the river, on the river side.
Oh, yeah, they're just, yeah, that's a good point.
So that would mess up your
Yeah.
stone wall, right?
They could be put below the stone wall.
The pipes are just run under the stone wall.
Well, they might run parallel to
In other words, move the tanks to the north, directly to the north, and stay below the stone wall.
it. Yep. I mean, do you have a concern or you just have a question?
Well, as I said, I attended this meeting just to learn about what was going on.
I understand.
And it only came up in the last 2 minutes of me looking at this diagram that this became anything that I even thought about, because I hadn't noticed it before.
Right.
Um,
Do you
But-
want, you can ask Chris your question about any safety or other concerns. This board is not going to be able to answer any technical questions with that
Right.
regard. Chris is the designer, so.
No, actually, I'm familiar with Chris because he helped me out a couple of years ago as well.
Okay,
So we're all on,
please address your
Yeah.
questions to Chris so that he can help the board understand how to evaluate your
well, I
concerns.
guess the only thing that I'm looking at now is, again, from my knowledge of the amount of space between the house and our property line,
Yes,
I'm almost having a hard time envisioning that there's room for tanks there. That's what I'm noticing right now.
um,
So I would like to be able to, I guess, sort that out, that there is room.
that your concern is that these tanks actually might be on your property.
Or just
Um,
very close.
Or very, very
Yeah,
close.
yeah.
Yes, that is a concern,
Right. We're already in the setback anyway,
right?
so, we can address the setback issue on its own merits.
Yep,
We cannot help you establish a boundary,
I understand that,
and nor can Sanger, so,
okay.
I mean, not tonight anyway.
No, I understand that too.
Okay, so if you want us to proceed with the information we have as the way the drawing is drawn, we can do that. But shifting it to some other point is not gonna settle the boundary issue.
Yeah, I'm not trying to settle the boundary issue
Yeah,
right
it's
now.
just- yeah,
I'm
just
trying to make sure
distance,
that the
yeah.
tanks don't end up on my property.
We don't, no
Right.
matter what happens, we're not
Well, I
gonna know
think
that.
a resolution would seem fitting just to be within a 75-foot radius and just use a different material, right, Chris? And then go underneath the stone wall, like, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel and make it more cost prohibitive, I'm just trying to see if could that be a good solution where it's,
But this isn't a boundary, there's no boundary on this map.
no, but it shifts it up. His concern isn't the boundary, it's that it's within 18 feet per Chris, possibly even closer, so if the two tanks are shifted north, you're getting further and further away, which just gives
Yes.
a good buffer, a better buffer.
We don't know where the property line is, that's what we're trying to talk about here.
Right, but
Right, but-
we can't answer that, and we know that if the tanks are shifted north, there at least won't be a worse buffer. So-
Yeah.
There'll be more room, but it still doesn't tell us, it doesn't answer the question is, are they in the setback or are they on the property?
But that, we can't resolve that, like, unless they're gonna go get a survey or something, we can't resolve that tonight. So,
I don't, it's up to the applicant to decide what they wanna do. So either we table this, for example, that's one way to do it, until we get a definitive answer on where the property line is. Or we can shift the tanks, but shifting the tanks won't tell us if they're within the setback or not.
Is any of this, trying to, like, save that wall? Cause that's not that important to me.
No,
nope.
other than just noting it's there.
I mean, Chris, in theory, could you shift it up like another, I'm sorry, how far do the tanks have to be from the well?
50 feet.
Well,
50?
I think Chris said 50, if he means.
50 for the tank, 75 for the leach field, okay.
I guess one of the questions you guys is, would shifting the tanks to the north
Give you peace of mind.
give you more peace of
Yeah.
mind?
Yeah, I think that, again, not knowing exactly where the
Yeah.
property line is, the further north those tanks go, the further they're gonna be from the nebulous property line.
Right, but the sewer line's still gonna go right where it is now, or someplace close to that.
The property widens as you go further north.
Right,
It's narrowest right behind the house.
no, I
And then as you go further north, it gets much wider. So if you shift the tanks further north, then by default, you're getting
Yeah.
further from the undefined property line.
And then the pipes are just gonna be angled towards
Right.
the tanks anyway,
Right.
so you're not gonna be,
you're gonna go through the.
everything's gonna go further away then.
Is that acceptable to the applicant? Sanger?
I don't know, what did we just say?
Do you have a copy of the map?
Not with me, no.
Let's see if I have,
Or the,
Can you put it up on the,
that's what I'm gonna see if I have.
yeah, but
um,
can you make it bigger?
Yeah, just, I have to share the screen so everyone can see it.
Okay, all right, so we're gonna take a look at the map, so we're all looking at the same piece of paper.
There we go.
All right,
So that's the map.
right, so can you put your cursor further up towards the well, but still so it's 50 feet away, and show that as right behind the ADU?
Yep, it'd be,
mhm.
Right. So that is the location that would give your abutter to the west more comfort, Sanger. And if
Okay.
Chris is okay with that, it does mean more expense because you have a different type of septic tank and different pipe.
How much is the expense differential approximately, Chris?
I'd say about $1,000.
That's fine.
Okay. All right. All right. Any other questions? You okay with that resolution?
I think that's fine.
Okay, I don't wanna put words in your mouth, I'm just asking literally, are you okay with that? Because that's the proposal then that we'll
Right,
go
now,
with.
from my knowledge of the property, if we shift the tanks where we're proposing right now, then it would not be on my property.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
All right. And we're gonna treat the whole design as if it's within the setback regardless,
Okay,
because we don't have the other.
because we don't know that right now.
That's right, okay. Is that, you okay with that?
Okay,
All right.
And for everyone's peace of mind, it looks like the legend, and I know this isn't completely accurate, but it's almost closer to 40 feet shifting it up that direction, if you look at the
Okay.
scale on
Right.
here, so we're
Yeah,
almost
right,
doubling, yeah.
yes.
Yep.
And remember this,
As a buffer.
the scale, you gotta,
It varies depending on which part.
well, the scale is based on a larger drawing, the drawing's been
Oh,
Right.
dropped
oh,
down.
which is even better, yeah,
So this is, 1 inch is not gonna equal.
gotcha.
If it's 18 feet now, and we move it over there,
It looks-
Joey
it
says
appears
it's gonna
that
be
it's-
closer
yeah.
to double that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to
Okay,
say I
thank you.
had shrunk the map down.
What is the, what is the setback in
Uh,
this district?
It's 35 feet.
All right, so we're gonna assume it's 40 feet then.
Yeah,
Okay, so the tank's not in the setback, but the leach field is. All right, so that's, all right, Chris, are you okay with these changes we're talking about?
Right, so, putting the septic tanks where you were waving the cursor back and forth there, 50 feet away from the well, behind the ADU, and I can also line the tanks up so that they're, and turn them 90 degrees.
Mm.
And that will give you more clearance to the property line doing that too.
That's great.
Okay, all right. So with that, without actually having the map in front of us, I think we're okay, Chris and Sanger, to move forward with an approval on the amended map as we've discussed. Is that acceptable to you guys?
It is to me, thank you very much.
All right, okay. All right, are you ready for deliberation? All right, so our next piece here, Sanger, and you, sir, is to go into deliberation, which means we'll discuss this among ourselves and with David. We'll come to a decision and a vote. If at any time during our deliberation you hear something or realize we're missing something, wave your hand, let us know. We'll come out of deliberation, get your comments and concerns, and go forward from there, all right? Okay, so we need a motion.
I move we enter deliberation.
All right, thank you, Helen. All in favor?
Second.
All right.
Second.
How could it get more complicated? Okay, so, are there any other issues that we need to address with David? Any other things you think of, David?
No, I would just as part of the approval, have me look at the map prior to,
Right, definitely, yeah,
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely, right.
the amended map.
yeah.
Okay. Let's, I don't think there are any environmental issues, it's just, this is just strictly of the setback issue itself.
Yeah, it's outside the river
Yeah.
setback, which
Right.
is, would be another issue if,
Yep,
If it was, yeah, if it fell into there. Okay.
all right.
She says that we can do that for a replacement system.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that we're doing here, if this was strictly a replacement of the leach field only, just
Right.
using the same tank again, we wouldn't be increasing the setback violation. In this case, because we just agreed to move the tanks, we're not increasing the setback violation,
Right.
so.
We only have it to the north.
Well, but the other tank, the other field is already
Oh,
there.
yeah, they moved that, yep,
Right, so,
I gotcha.
so there's two different, one is an increase of the non-conforming use, the other is the expansion of the non-conforming. I see that as an interesting distinction, but I don't think we're increasing the violation. Would that be your understanding, David, the way we're talking about this?
yes.
Okay.
Would seem that we're decreasing the violation, right, because the leach field is a
Moving,
bit to
yeah.
this, yeah, maybe, 10 feet or whatever to the south.
Well, again, we don't, it's arguably, we don't, could be even on the others, the existing field could be on someone else's property partially. The way the map, I mean.
Well,
Without
we're not
any
gonna do
boundaries,
anything
I
on the
know.
existing fields.
Yeah, so, I don't know. no conservation districts involved in this?
Nope.
So are you ready for a motion?
Yes.
Okay.
I move that we approve the, installation of the new septic system, according to 513E3, that special exceptions may be given for replacement systems, with the property line setback. And also based on the, conformity with the special exception, details in, A 1 through 14. Do we need to review those individually, or?
Well, ultimately, we do, yeah.
Okay.
But,
Yeah.
did you mention that we're working on a modified map, subject to David's approval?
I was gonna mention that at the end.
Okay, all right.
As the like criteria for approval.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right, okay, yeah.
but we can say that now, that.
No, you're drafting a motion, so that's right, I just,
Well, I move we approve the modified plan according to what we discussed with the septics, or with the tanks, moved to the north behind the ADU and lined up such that they provide acceptable distance between the estimated property line, and the location of the tanks, and are constructed using the recommended materials such that they're safe to be within the well radius. This approval is based on the fact that the use will be in harmony with the purposes and intent of the ordinance. It will be in harmony with the general purposes, goals and objectives, standards of the master plan. The site is the appropriate and the only location, given the topography, soils, et cetera, and the property layout. It'll be compatible with neighboring developed and open space uses, present and prospective, especially as discussed with the updates that seem acceptable to the property abutters. The use will not adversely affect the character, including developed and open spaces, or value of neighboring properties. The use will be designed, constructed, and operated, maintained so as to be harmonious and appropriate in appearance with the existing or intended character of the general vicinity. The use will not be hazardous or disturbing to existing or future neighboring developed or open spaces. The use will not involve uses, activities, processes, materials, or equipment, blah, 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 detrimental to any person or property, or general welfare. The use will have particular approaches to the property which shall be so designed as to not create interference with traffic on surrounding public streets or roads. Use will not result in the destruction or loss of, or damage to significant wildlife habitat. The use will be adequately served by and will not impose undue burden on any public improvements. The planning board to review and approve the use of, if such review and approval is required. I don't think that's something that we,
Yeah,
This
not
was-
applicable.
not
this section doesn't apply to the plan.
okay.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, operations in connection with these shall not be more objectionable to nearby properties by reason of noise, fumes, odor, vibration, et cetera. And the use will be adequately served by parking area if not applicable, okay, great. That's it, right? Do we need to do 1040B? No.
I think the only one that we, would be
This is
that,
more like
that the plan submitted be,
Consistent
subject to
with-
David's
Yeah,
yeah.
approval.
Yes, so, the plan submitted should be subject to David's final approval and consistent with what we discussed here as the modified design.
Good job. Okay, are you ready for a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, good. Well, thank you, Sanger. Chris, thank you. Appreciate it. So you're all set. You have, under the ordinance, you have 30 days when our decision can be appealed. So if you proceed, you do so at your own risk. But I think you already know what the layout is and all that sort of thing. So, you haven't sent this off to Concord yet, have you?
No, needs my approval first.
That's right, okay. So you're still a ways away from being able to hire a digger.
Actually, Concord tends to turn these things around fairly quickly. I've seen
They only do them
them,
like a week, don't they?
I've seen them even
Yeah.
done, I approve them in the morning and Chris sends them off and I get the approval back that afternoon.
Okay. All right. Chris, any questions? Sanger, any questions?
I'll send you down I'll email you a revised print, Dave.
Yep.
Okay?
Perfect.
All right,
Good.
good. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
So
you.
without taking up, if you have just a moment for a question, like, if I did learn that this was actually on my property, like, what's the recourse now that this has passed?
Even in its amended position, for example?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's very unlikely in its amended position.
I mean, this is really, I mean, you're a butter, or the applicant is no longer online, so
Right.
we're kind of having an ex-party discussion here, but basically, this board cannot resolve boundary line issues. And in the absence of a survey that you both agree to, you know, we don't have anything to say about it. If the applicant says, this is my boundary, that's what we go with. If you say, oh, I disagree, then, you know, you guys have to go in the other room and hash it out.
I see.
Do you have a survey?
I don't have a survey. What I have is a photo of a pin that is in the ground, was in
Yeah,
the ground
yeah,
2
it's
years
weird
ago,
it's not.
Right.
and is not in the ground now, which establishes the boundary reasonably close to their house and,
Yeah.
so that I can tell you definitively, those tanks would have been on our property had we not moved them. That's what I know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so,
that's interesting.
It's
And
interesting.
obviously, the applicant didn't know that.
I don't know what the applicant knows.
Well, no, I mean,
Yeah.
I think he doesn't have a survey either, so.
No, we don't have a survey, I just, again, the pin that I have the photo of existed 20 years ago when we bought our house.
yeah,
Yeah.
And I have a photo from 2 years ago, I don't know what's happened to it in the meantime.
yeah. it's weird.
So that suggests that somebody surveyed the property and put the pin in the ground, right?
Yeah, 20 years, well, before we ever bought our property, we bought our property in 2003, so antedating that, somebody surveyed it, yes.
And there's
Chris-
nothing on file in Woodsville?
In Woodsville, I haven't checked,
Yeah,
okay.
I mean, that would be the least expensive way to find out.
Yep.
So, who do I contact in Woodsville?
The registrar of deeds
Okay.
and see if there's a survey for either property.
Great,
Are those recorded online?
Yes, but you have to pay, and it's,
$5 a page, I mean.
yeah, and it's not easy to find things, it's a lot easier to talk to them,
okay.
they know the system.
And the plans aren't filed with the deeds,
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
so.
I appreciate your
And I
time.
think you've got 30 days, I mean, technically, you've got 30
Yeah.
days to try and find it, yeah,
Okay.
just for peace of mind.
Yeah, I mean, right, and what I'm trying to say is you don't expect us to be an advocate for
No, I'm not
any
expecting
position.
that at all, I
I know,
was just
just-
trying to get information, that's
Yeah,
all.
I understand, I just want, you know, this comes up occasionally,
Mhm.
and it is a problem, but, because we're essentially a rural town,
Mhm.
a lot of property has changed hands over the last 250 years without anything other than along the property now or formerly of Smith, and then formerly of Jones, and formerly of, you know, that's it, so, you know, there's no meets and bounds paper document that describes, and even the legislature in their wisdom said that the boundary of the property is the center line of the traveled way. Now, most of these right-of-ways are three-rod roads, which is 49.5 feet. But the traveled way can be right or left of that 49 feet,
Mhm.
which is presumably what the town has the right for transportation. But that doesn't mean the original center line of that traveled way is the original center line of the right-of-way.
Yeah.
And there can be stone walls, and we have to ignore the stone walls. We can't even assume the stone walls are descriptive of the property line, of the right-of-way boundary. And so you can imagine when we're talking about setbacks along the road, yeah, just, it's a mess.
Well, thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah, good luck.
Good night.
Thank you.
All right, Rich.
Okay.
Let's get our paperwork here.
Do you guys mind? I have like an old copy of the ordinance which doesn't have 462C.
Yeah, would you like this one?
Trade you?
That's why I have,
Oh,
That's why
thank
I-
you, I've been dying.
I did add, just so you know, on these, there's some extra stuff in the back, there's other ordinances that I've included.
Oh, good, thank you.
The telecommunications, small.
Oh, yeah, all the new,
The floodplain ordinance,
Yep,
stuff you don't normally deal with, but
okay.
We're all in one place.
get all in one place now.
All right.
Wait,
Okay.
this doesn't have 462C either. Maybe,
here it just says A and B.
yeah.
I think I messed up, and it should be 463.
Oh, okay.
My apologies.
No.
A and B, Dave, or, oh, sorry, just C within 463, gotcha.
Yeah.
Special
Yeah.
exception.
And dyslexia kicked in again.
So,
I did, well, Rich will vouch for my minutes this last time for the planning board. Tim Cook, I messed his name up, and not the Cook part, the Tim part. I messed up about 4 different times. Either Tim, Tom, TM, and because of my dyslexia, when I read something, if there are letters missing or they're wrong, but I know what it should be, my mind will put the letters in, and I'll never see it. And it's annoying as all get out, but,
Well, and then, of course, all of the modern computer devices know exactly what you were typing and meant to type, and it'll autocorrect for you. Which,
Except when it doesn't.
well, or you send a birthday card out and it says, you know, dear, you know,
Dear
instead
Tom.
of Betsy, it's Barney or something. I was like, oh, thanks a lot. All right, so we're in trouble, but we're really, this is a variance, not a special exception.
right, if you look at 463, C2, no underground fuel storage
No,
tank.
yeah, that I
That's
understand that.
It's from the
So
groundwater.
we can't start there. The interesting thing is, and I read your notes,
Thank you.
Rich, so, you know, if we were talking about fuel oil tanks,
Right.
that kind of thing, I could see an absolute prohibition of that.
Absolutely, I totally agree.
But the interesting thing is, if you remember some of the flood pictures, you see the propane tanks
Yep.
bobbing down the river.
Right.
So, and clearly those are, you know, hazardous from a number of perspectives, so, but you're on a lake,
Mm-hmm.
so,
One thing, I did provide this map,
yes, I see that, yeah.
and the floodplain is on the pond side. It doesn't even,
Yeah, yeah,
you know, this is the,
right, pond, yes.
yep, and
Oh,
so,
okay.
the flood zone, they don't even have it up covering the full pond. But, assuming that they bring it up to the shoreline, it doesn't cross.
I understand.
So and if that was, if it was in a flood zone, we wouldn't be here because the floodplain regulations,
Okay.
the federal regulations are very clear that,
Okay.
and it's only the issue of the no underground fuel
Shoreline.
storage tanks are permitted.
So, shall I give a brief overview of my long notes?
Absolutely, this is your application.
All right,
so,
thanks.
But as you noted earlier, the extra 10 minutes didn't help at the select board meeting. No, so, we've had the application for
Yep.
several days, so, but please, feel free
Sure, I'll
to.
give you an overview of it.
Yeah, please.
My name is Rich Brown. I live on Orford Road, right across from the pond. And we installed a generator with a buried propane tank. And so, because it's within 200 feet of Post Pond, in fact, almost my entire house is within 200 feet of Post Pond. It turns out that that does put it within the Shoreline Conservation District. David says the only way to solve that is to get a variance. And so I went through all the points of the variance, you know, I think putting the propane tank there is consistent with the spirit of the ordinance. If you remember, if you are aware and knowledgeable that the propane basically cannot pollute a water body because it just evaporates up into the air. And so I think the wording of the ordinance is overbroad. If they prohibited oil tanks, as Bill suggested, that would be absolutely correct, or oil and gas tanks. And in fact, in the state RSAs, which I printed and are safely at home on my printer, they draw a very clear distinction between gas and oil. And they say no oil tanks close to water, and then they say this absolutely does not apply to propane or natural gas. So I would ask this board for a variance because it won't pollute the lake, and so I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you.
And I would say that is, what he was saying is consistent with what my research, that propane tanks are, you know, it's a pressurized gas. When it's released, it
And until
evaporates.
the planning board does something with it, this is what we're stuck with.
That's right.
So, with all due respect, I mean, it just, we find,
I
frequently
understand.
find inconsistencies in the ordinance internally and externally, and we bring these to the planning board's attention annually with a request to
Mhm.
take note, and we're usually, don't get any
Well,
satisfaction.
After we finish with this business, I'll put on my other hat, and,
That's okay.
and you can ask me.
I'm gonna go home and have dinner, so.
Oh, well, let's make this short, I'll shut up.
I'm just kidding. No, we're here in the
Thank you.
public sphere. So just to be clear, yes, it's absolutely obvious that this language is inconsistent with the statute.
Right.
But we can't change that for tonight.
Of course, I understand.
So,
The only other thing I wanted to bring up
yes, please.
was, propane has an additive, called mercaptan, that's the odor you smell.
Yep.
And I did pull out the safety data sheet, and it does list it as an aquatic hazard, acute and long-term. What that means, good question, you know, and how much of mercaptan is in,
Right,
and so I just wanted to,
right. And it, again, without challenging the science that you're alluding to, that the gas will dissipate, it would dissipate presumably in the water, and how much of the chemical that gives it the odor stays in the water or doesn't. And, you know, this is bubbling slowly and so forth and so on. I mean, there's a lot of scenarios here that we're not prepared to address.
And I would also go back to the fact that the state allows,
No,
so,
Yep.
even though, you know, I wanted to bring that up, but I said, again, the state allows for it, so, I would assume that their scientists have looked at this and feel it's not an issue.
Yep.
But that way, we've covered it, we've said it, and
Good.
it's,
Okay, so we have 5 criteria, which you've already alluded to when we look at a special exception.
various.
A variance, I beg your pardon, yes, thank you, variance. And we have to vote on each one independently. Just so the mechanics are there, we can't just go, you know, motion to approve, we have to vote on all 5. And the one that usually, and my compatriots here on the board can chime in on this, the one that always is the problem is the last one. The enforcement would result in an unnecessary hardship. That really, that's actually, the hardship has to be caused by the property, not by what you wanna do. So, and the other definition of the hardship is, I think it's, you know, an exception to the neighborhood, for example. So you could have a huge outcrop just on your property, and everybody else in that neighborhood doesn't have that, which would be a hardship that is attributable to the property itself. So, just so, it's very easy to assume the hardship is your hardship. It's actually a hardship that's caused by the property.
Okay.
And that's the other piece that makes this sometimes challenging to get through. And I accept that, you know, we can discuss this before we go into deliberation, if you have any thoughts that you want Rich to be aware of before we do that, as you think about what we've done in the past on variances, when we get to the hardship question. And we also are aware that this is in place
Right.
Right.
already, and what we're gonna, because of the way we have to, I think this is true, we can discuss this also. I think we're gonna take this as an application before the fact, not after the fact.
Well, and in fact, I considered that, and the fact is that had I come and got applied for a zoning permit, David would have said, yes, but, and I would have gone back here anyway.
Right, but you
So-
might be back here for a special exception, or not. You'd have had some choices to make anyways, if you wanted to or not.
Okay.
If you were outside the setback, we wouldn't be here.
Well, but this is clearly the best location for the tank,
I'm
so,
not,
so
this
that's-
is not an argument,
Yeah,
this
right.
is just so we're aware that we're dealing with this only because you did do what you did and you want to apply for it as you did it,
I
not
see.
as you might have done it had you known beforehand.
okay, so,
You could have made decisions about where the generator was going to get placed differently.
I see.
And so, you know, could have driven a whole lot of other,
I see what you're saying, and the other question, I mean, my obvious solution, if this variance request was turned down, would be to move it back outside the 200-foot distance. And there is a little ledge there that I don't know how far down it is. So that's an interesting question, so that's another
Yep.
hardship question. So let me ask this question, this might be a question of David, if I'd come, ask for the zoning permit, you said, geez, you can't put it there because it's 200 feet. Would there have been a special exception?
no, there's no special, because there's nothing written right there that says
Okay,
you can have a special exception.
all right, so, good. I think that's all I'll say.
Right. It's just, I mean, you have the option to withdraw the application and
Mhm.
satisfy the ordinance, you know how to do that.
By moving the tank?
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
right,
Okay, so, I'm trying to lay out all of the
thank you.
issues here,
Thank you.
so
Yes,
we're not, pretending that
right,
there's a different set of circumstances.
all right.
so.
yes, I like where it is. I'm not fond of the idea of actually
Okay.
digging it up and moving it, the expense of digging it up and moving it, so let's continue with this.
Okay, so
Thank you.
that's why I wanted to make sure
Yep.
that we were talking about hardship in the context, not your hardship,
Yes,
but the property hardship.
okay,
All
all right.
Okay. And I have an external generator, and I had to run the gas line a long way through with a hand machine digging the
Really?
trench, and I know exactly what you would be looking at if you did that, unless you did it with a backhoe. So it's
I had
no
a friend
fun.
with a backhoe, yeah.
It's no fun, all right, so, okay. Any other questions, any other thing we wanna make Rich aware of before we go into deliberation?
I have a question about how you decided to go with an external, like, propane generator based on your property. If, did you consider, like, battery backup or some kind of, like, load control system instead?
So at the time, we had a pretty wet basement, and so I wasn't fond of the idea of storing lots of electric batteries in there. Would have been a possibility, but no, at the time, the basement was not good. It's a hard basement too. It's dirt floor, low ceilings, and so,
They don't have to be in your basement though, like, it
well,
would have been much easier.
my
to
lot
find
is
the-
already overstuffed,
How long has the generator been in place?
since January.
Oh,
Yep. And so there's not a lot of place to put things in my yard. I had to come to this board, not you folks, I don't think, for a chicken coop.
I think that was one of my first cases. I think that
Was it?
yeah,
Okay.
you were too, yeah, you were
Yes,
too.
okay,
Yeah, that's
and
right.
so,
That's right.
there's not a lot of extra space for me to put things in the lot. So I just said, I know how a propane generator works. It's very clear, as long as you keep putting propane in, it'll work. And so, I'm not ready for battery backup. And in fact, I don't know if it's probably not relevant for this meeting, but the folks at Revision, when we asked about it, said, no, batteries aren't the answer for you. They might well give a different answer to other people, so.
Do you have a battery home?
No, but I will soon.
Good,
Oh,
good.
but not a generator.
No, well, so we have not had a generator, well, this is kind of like a tangent, I guess. There's never been a generator at that house because it wasn't connected to the, like, grid until the 70s, because the
Mhm.
farmer who lived there was like, I don't need that newfangled electric crap. And so the people who bought it in the 70s connected it to the grid, but it's on its own little spur from the main line off Dorchester. So it almost never loses power, even when the rest of our neighborhood does.
Wow.
Except for the last, like,
Oh,
couple of
no.
years, those big wet storms.
Yeah.
We lost power, and then, because we're the only
Does it
house
come up
on
to
that
the tree
little
line?
spur,
Like,
yeah, it comes up like
yeah,
by the sheep
yeah.
pasture. Cause we're the only house on the spur, it can be like days before it's back on. So, but I work in a, like, solar company, and we develop batteries and load control systems and things like that, so I'm gonna discount through work. So that's why I'm gonna have a battery soon. But it's also why I've, like, learned a lot
Research
about
on it,
the benefits of using batteries, especially combined with the load control system,
Mhm.
as opposed to a generator. And so I was just wondering if you had considered that as an option, because I see that from the pictures that you have solar on your
Yes,
house already,
Yeah,
so.
right. We did think about it and then said, not yet.
yeah.
Okay.
I may have to talk to you after. Okay, so,
I move we move into deliberation.
okay, good, all right, thank you.
Seconded.
All right, thank you, okay. Rich, you've heard our description before, if you
Yes,
need,
go ahead.
just wait, okay, all right. What's your pleasure? Here, let's get to the, I need to flip to the right section.
Yeah, so we're, first of all, we need to note that it's 463, C in 1 and 2, 4.63.
Which is on the application I had, it's just my info sheet, I,
Perfect, okay.
yeah.
All right, so we're up to 1050.
Yeah.
I mean, I can find favorably, I'll express
Yeah,
myself.
yeah.
I can find favorably on 1 through 4, but I get tripped up on 5A.
This version means that only special.
And that's, this is always the stinker in the woodpile, because you just, everybody thinks that hardship means it's hard for me.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Not about the property, and I wish that the legislature would do a better job helping us with this, but
Mhm.
in terms of, but, and specifically, we have the language in the special exception that says fuel tanks can't be.
Yeah, that is very clear.
Yeah,
I'm
it's-
sort of struggling with that too.
Yeah, so even when we move over to variance, we have to find somehow that having the fuel, even though it's, the kind of fuel tank that probably isn't a problem if we looked at the science, we can't change the ordinance, so I think, but I'm always open.
We can't just note per the state's recommendation?
Well, but, see, the ordinance is pretty clear, that's the thing, so. Otherwise, if the ordinance was taken into account the state, right, then we could do this as a special exception, because it's a
Right.
propane tank, although still in the shoreline setback, right?
Yeah.
But, I don't know, it's just,
I think that when this type of issue has come up in past cases though, it's been made clear to me, like we are not rewriting the ordinance here. It is not our objective to interpret what we think it should be based on the
oh, we can't,
Science,
because, yeah,
like,
we're a judicial body that, right, has to look at the document, exactly, yeah.
and the document is very clear, so I don't,
Yeah.
I'm not sure how to read it different way.
Yeah, and only if I hadn't had the personal experience of running a gas line 250 feet from where the propane tanks are to where we wanted the generator, it was cheaper to run the gas line
Well,
than
then,
it
yeah,
was
so the
to-
generator can stay exactly where it is.
Right,
It's
I mean,
simply just the propane tank that would
I'm
be.
just saying,
Yeah,
we
I
put the
gotcha.
generator, it was
Yep.
cheapest from an electrical point
Yep.
of view to get into the house. The cheap part was just renting the machine to dig the trench
Right.
and hook up to where the propane tanks were at the far end of the building. So, I mean, so I know there's a solution here that's feasible, generally speaking, although we do know that Rich said there might be ledge. I guess the other issue is, you don't have to bury these things. They stay above ground. They're not particularly attractive. I think that's certainly true, but
I mean, the viable spot to move a propane tank would be to the
uphill,
east.
yeah.
So the line would run.
I just, these were the, as I read the application and thought about things, these were the things that occurred to me.
Mhm.
But,
Is
The
this-
section B, the language in section B does give us, the right to make a determination, but I don't, see it yet.
So we're talking about, what, like 100 feet east is where the line would have to be run? And we think that's ledge up in like that eastern corner of the property? Sorry, it's hard for me to tell if that's an actual.
Mr. Chair, I can offer some information if you wish.
All right, we have to go out to deliberation to do that, but, okay, yes, thank you. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Yes, please.
So what you're looking at here is the proposed, the potential location would be behind the two-car garage.
That's what I was wondering, okay.
Yes, and the ledge is between the house and the garage, running out toward, to the, what's the north there, to the left.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
We're out of deliberation at the moment, so if, couple of questions come to mind. A, leaving this above grade outside the district, outside the shoreline setback. That's one,
Yes.
where you're not digging. In other words, you're not burying, although you'd still want the line buried.
Right. Oh, I think the space directly behind the garage is fine.
Mhm.
I just know there's a little vein
Yeah.
of ledge between
Right,
that.
and you'd be putting the copper feed from the tank in conduit anyway, has to be.
It's actually
Maybe it's a
It's like
different
it's a
kind
plastic,
Yeah.
of, the plastic
plastic
coated,
pipe, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
but it's copper inside the plastic.
I don't know.
Yeah. Doesn't matter, anyway,
Yeah.
okay, so it's direct
Suspect.
ground contact.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yes.
I mean, would it make more, are we allowed to deliberate on that, or would it make more sense to maybe do that research? And then have that as a do you know what I mean, like? I've just never had it, something not pass as of yet, or be delayed or something like that, so how do we address that?
Well, I mean, okay, so we have denied other variances,
Mhm.
just as we've denied special exceptions, because not often, usually.
Right, but I'm not suggesting deny, you know, like just, well, I guess it would be denying it in essence, but having a solution oriented.
We,
Like-
I mean, it's in place,
Mhm.
it's not gonna get any worse.
Right,
If
exactly.
we table this and ask Rich to come back later. I assume there's no additional penalties, David?
No, since he's coming to the board, I'm not going to
Okay.
consider it a violation
All right,
because he's working on a solution. So there is a clock, you
Because then
know.
that could prove hardship. I mean, that just gives you the ability to say, okay, yes, this is, it actually could be done and get me out of the shoreland.
Yeah.
Or if it can't be done in the spot that makes the most sense, that would actually work for the existing situation, it could then prove hardship
yeah.
compared to other property,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we table it, we need to have some like specific expectation for what he's supposed to come back with.
oh, right,
Because-
yeah, I think the expectation is tabling it to do research in terms of another viable spot that's outside of the
Yeah,
shoreline.
I would just have a third party do that research because that way it's,
Valid, it's,
right,
yeah,
it's not,
a professional, yeah.
right, a professional opinion that there is, you can't put it behind,
Right.
you know.
Are you okay if we proceed with some variation of asking the applicant to come back with either a different proposal or more documentation for hardship? In general terms, we can get the language nailed down, but I mean, or are you just thinking, no way, Jose?
No, I think that's a fine way to proceed. I guess I'm like, to me, that seems like we are rejecting this application and he can like reapply with additional information. But I don't know if that's just like semantics.
Well, what it would be is you would basically continue the hearing until next month and ask, that you have someone come in, and check and see if that position behind the garage is viable or not. And if their report comes back and says, no, that's not viable, I think putting it in the front yard is not really a viable request either, that's, but.
Really, they would have to come back and say there's no other viable option
Right, so you
outside of the
basically
shoreline
have
buffer.
someone
Yeah,
come in, and say, there's no other viable options for this.
We did this with the solar array from Mancuso, right?
I don't remember. Oh, I think I heard the second part of it, I don't ever think I heard the first part of it, when they did have to come back.
So we got,
Listen.
I missed the first part.
Yeah, and the follow-up was what we,
Right, because he was able to put some of it
Right.
on
yeah,
the garage roof.
yeah,
Okay, so,
okay.
yeah, I mean, I think if we don't give, if we have two choices, we can deny it tonight. I think we're all at least leaning in that direction, if I understand, as proposed, or we can give the applicant a chance to either change his mind or build a better case for hardship, either or.
I think I would be more in favor of just giving the opportunity versus
Yeah.
flat out denying it. I just feel like that keeps the momentum going up in either direction. But I mean, at least it's already tabled for the next meeting. Or,
So, yeah, that's fine. So then is the assumption that, like, we're tabling it just until the next meeting, and the expectation is that he'll come back with some additional information at that time?
Or they'll come back and say, yes, it can go there, or and you're happy and you wanna withdraw the application, or
Right.
you could say, come back and say, they've dug down there, it's all
No
ledge.
way.
There's no way of getting the tank down to the depth it needs to be.
what's the size of the tank? I
It's a
apologize.
320
It is.
gallon,
It's
yeah.
a big tank.
Yeah,
And, that then that, says, all right, there's really no other place that's a reasonable.
does that tank fuel the house as well, or is that strictly the generator? Or just a couple like stoves?
We have a gas
stove
range,
range, okay.
and so a little bit for the gas range and
The majority,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
right. And I'm not sure if you're in deliberation or not, but.
No, we're out.
No, we're out.
Okay, the other question is, would my excavator be a sufficient, expert?
I would think so, they're the
Yeah.
ones that can test the.
Yeah.
Yeah, if they
That's-
dig
Okay,
down and.
good.
Yep, and just as long as, a signed letter
Yep.
saying,
I think there are two issues. One is, can it be buried, yes or no, in
Mhm.
another place that's outside? And then you have to decide
Above ground,
whether
yeah.
having it above ground but landscaped,
Right.
shielded by buildings or whatever.
Yep.
And you don't have to dig, so,
Mhm.
but I think building the hardship case as it's proposed is a challenge for us,
Okay.
so.
I would say that if behind the garage for safety, because, the propane company is going to try to park on Route 10 to fill it. That's,
Mm.
whereas,
Well, that's another, yeah, could be all part of the follow-up research.
and
Filling
putting it
in,
behind the
like,
garage, they
whole-
can come into the yard and be off the road and be off the,
Mhm.
it'll make Sean a whole lot happier than having someone parking a propane truck in, right at the edge of the
Yeah,
road.
because they have, aside from installing, they haven't even had to fill it yet, have they? Or did they from these storms, did it go
Well,
out? Has it been
oh, they
filled
filled
yet?
it to start, yes, of course.
Yeah, just to start.
Where
right.
was your tank before?
It was just a little
Probably a
bottle
little
tank
I know,
right
but
next.
where was it
It was
before?
just for the
It was
rain.
tucked in,
Next to the house.
next to the house.
Oh, okay.
Basically, real
Above
close to where the
ground.
generator was, above ground, it was, it was a 60
Yeah.
gallon.
Just a range.
Range,
Or stove
yeah.
one.
All right, you okay with where we are?
I'm not delighted, but
Well,
but I understand your reasoning, yes.
all right, yeah, I mean, well, we can proceed otherwise if you.
No?
Okay, all right. All right, so let's go back into deliberation and then we'll follow up with what we've agreed to do, all right?
Fine.
All right,
I move,
all right, all in favor? Excellent, good. Okay. So I move, if it's all right, I move that we table this for the rest of this meeting and ask the applicant to come back with additional information at our next meeting, where we'll take up the exact same proposal. Or he'll withdraw because he tells David he doesn't need a variance. Rich doesn't need the variance. Is that, I mean, if, the choice is, Rich can come back with the same proposal, and some additional information.
Yep,
Okay.
seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. We have deliberation?
Move out of deliberation? Deliberation?
All right, good. Rich, thank you.
Okay.
I mean,
Thank you.
This is not a typical of variances where, you know, you end up kind
Very good. And I was sincere in my question, where I'm an alternate on the planning board. We have a new chair, Rich Mengy, and if you did pull together a bunch of suggestions for modifications to the ordinance, I would agitate that we at least talk about it.
Okay.
Good, thank you very much, I appreciate all your time.
Thank you, Rich.
Thank you. All right. Where is the driveway? It's hard to see it.
It's before the house, you're heading towards the pond.
It's just south of the house.
Yep.
It comes up off somebody else's property, doesn't it? Yeah.
It's right after lot line,
Right
right?
here.
What's this?
So,
He was
the-
wondering where your driveway
again,
was.
because of the, there could be some
Yeah,
difference.
it's actually our
between the-
driveway is on Lockline
Is it
Lodge
Lockline?
Oh,
property.
it is,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
so.
Okay,
Right
that's what I
away.
thought. All right, that's what I wondered, okay. All right,
Okay.
nobody else still wants